Welcome back to Material Atomics. I am Shiloh.
I'm Nastia.
Today I want to actually discuss what the point of this channel is, and it all comes down to what I like to call the first rule of physics, which is at the foundation of so much confusion and the reason that we even got into this. And the first rule of physics, as I see it, is that no two bodies can be in the same place at the same time. And this may seem obvious, but it seems to have escaped the basement layer of our physical pursuits over the past few centuries. Because ultimately, a lot of confusion that we deal with on this channel concerns the very minor misapprehension that you can't build any material representation, that is to say, any physical representation, out of ideas alone.
Wait, hold on. How does that tie to two objects can't be in the same place at the same time?
Well, I didn't say two objects is the thing.
You said two bodies, but two objects is a translation.
That's great that you think that. So the question becomes, is an object the same thing as a body? And I would argue that it is not the same thing as a body.
Why would you argue that?
Because an object can be conceived of in purely mathematical terms. An object is just a representation which can be manipulated. And I think the fact that people will take an object like a photon, which is...
Well, hold on. That's an assumption that says that an object is just like some Cartesian coordinates, which I don't think that so this comes down to whether or not you look at body and object as being semantic philosophical definitions of the same thing, or if you're talking mathematically.
Well, I think that the word object runs the risk of allowing the introduction of an idea as an abstract object, which can then be moved around and treated as if it is a physical body.
You can do the same thing with like body of work.
Right, exactly.
You can do object,
but
like,
nobody does that in physics. Nobody has ever mistaken the word body in physics for an abstraction. Bodies, going back to the roots of physics, have always been surface-bound volumes that have inward extension. That is unanimously what people mean when they say the body is moving, or the body. And at some point...
I thought you were going to say the body is on the table for some reason.
Well, they always think of those like kinematic diagrams with the block moving across the table, the body.
Yeah,
I don't mean like dissecting a body or something. But in physics, the word body is a much less ambiguous and much more robust term than object, because I used to think that object was the correct word, and I put this in front of numerous physicists, including my own advisor when I was in grad school. We had like a 4-hour conversation about this, and he was like, no, like an object can have 20 dimensions, I can treat it in a matrix, I can do whatever I want with it. And it really kind of left me scratching my head, because I thought, okay, that's a pretty good argument. Like, you can have these abstract objects, and you can manipulate them and move them about, but that leads to unending confusion, because at the end of the day, physics comes down to one body pushing or pulling on another body. And that's what I mean. What is push or pull? Push or pull is a result of the first rule of physics, which is that two bodies can't be in the same place at the same time. If one body moves where another body is, it moves it out of the way, or it deforms. Those are the only two options.
But deformation is the same thing as moving it out of the way, I would think.
Yeah,
whatever, like if their surfaces are touching and one surface is getting deformed, it's the same thing as being moved out of the way, even if it's not the gross thing itself that's being moved.
Exactly. And so I feel like if physics were to take this as the first principle, you would no longer have the problem of infinite recursion when it comes to theory, because you would have to say...
What is the principle of infinite recursion?
Well, I might not be using this term appropriately, but I think I am. And what I mean is that when you ask, say, a biologist about the electron transport chain, and you say, well, what is this charge stuff that's being transferred around? At some point, they're going to say, go ask a physicist. The physicist is going to say, well, it's an oppositional force that is ascribed as a quality to particles. And you say, well, what's a particle and what's a force? And they say, here's the mathematical representation of it. It's extremely accurate. It's predictive. We know that it works, and it allows us to build incredible technology. But that entire physical conception is built on an actorless system with no bodies involved whatsoever. And so if you were to at least maintain the notion that there is some actor that is doing this activity we call charge, then you can actually move into a more sane and intelligible form of physics where you can represent actors as participating in the actions that we capture with these mathematical representations and these abstract objects that allow us to produce great technology. So I'm curious because it seems like this schism happened discreetly at some point, and we just had this incredible conversation with Dr. Ogi Ogas, who is tangentially affiliated with Harvard, but he's a consciousness researcher fundamentally. And it's quite interesting to me how, and something we dance around on this show all the time, like, why do we even start this? Well, there's a lot of magic in quantum physics. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And people like it a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
And people want science to be able to give them magic. And I am totally fine with incredible, miraculous, amazing dimensions of existence and discussing them and probing them in a scientific, rational fashion. But I'm not sure that physics, which Ogi refers to as the purposeless dynamics, is the appropriate place to go looking for that magic.
Are you saying that the magic is purpose? Because I think that purpose is kind of magical, right? I think that that's why biology is such a weird and unique discipline, is because you're taking stuff that should be inanimate and through some kind of resonance or, this sounds so woo, but some kind of vibration that's inside the material, you suddenly get purpose, and then you have purpose-driven biology and you have purpose-driven behavior. And so there definitely is a tendency for there to be magic in purpose, and physics is inherently a non-magical discipline.
But people won't tolerate that, and they want the magic in the physics. See, here's the thing. Physics is at the top of the academic hierarchy, let's say dominance hierarchy, just to borrow a psychological term. The problem is physics isn't really equipped to be that dominant role because it can't address the purposeful side of things. You know, I get this pushback all the time when about this show and about all of the material atomics projects we work on, where people say, "Oh, you're a materialist." And I'm like, no, how could you think that? The reason that we do this show is to point out that the material basis is just one aspect of reality. That doesn't mean that we can ignore it or that we can just wrap it in with the magic of life. It's not something so simple. It's a separate discipline which has separate language and separate tools that can address it. But it's not a complete science by itself. The physics is only one half of reality, if even a half, right? The stories that play out in our individual lives, our motivations and purposes are in some sense much more real than the physics that they play out upon. I mean, they're both real, don't get me wrong. But I don't think that physics is, I think it is the usurper of the throne of science, and I don't think that that's good for humans in general. And the key, one last thing I want to say, the key to correcting that problem is to realizing that physics has a limitation, and that limitation is that it's restricted to the dynamics of bodies, right? It's not capable of addressing ideas built on other ideas, built on other ideas. Other sciences might be able to do that, but physics has to start with the understanding that two bodies can't be in the same place at the same time. And if you don't have that understanding locked down in your mechanism, you're not doing physics anymore. You're bleeding in other sciences that are getting in the way.
So, are you suggesting that next week we'll do quantum consciousness?
No, I am not. I mean, we'll be doing plenty of that on the other show, but I think
the other show that shall not be named.
yeah, Demystify Sci podcast. Check it out. We'll be exploring all sorts of different scientific perspectives on nature, but the goal of this program is to look at the physical substrate upon which all of those experiences play out, and it's not taking anything away from them to restrict physics to this material realm of existence, this place where you have bodies that have definite locations and they're pulling and pushing on each other. That is a very real and rational conception of the universe, but it's incomplete. And the first way that we can move towards integrating it is to understand its limitations.
I like that.
So let's pause here. We'll take apart another physical phenomenon next week, but I wanted to take a break and at least get on the same page about what the purpose of this project is. We're not materialists. We're just doing material atomics because nobody else is, and it needs to be done.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. See you next time, guys.